2016 as the valedictorian of the University of the Bahamas, where he earned every possible academic and special award viable to a candidate. Dr. Johnson holds a Bachelor of Education in Biology and a Master of Science in Environmental Management with a focus on climate change with a distinction from the University of the West Indies. He has a PhD in Disaster Management from North Dakota State University. Dr. Johnson's work has been published in esteemed journals, including the Journal of Coastal Research, the International Journal of Disaster Risk Reduction, and the Journal of Disaster Risk Studies. Trevor taught in the Bahamian public school system for 3 years and was lauded as a dynamic, firm, and exceptional educator. He expanded the Save Our 7th Graders program at the 8 Mile Rock High School by registering over 100 7th graders to sit the Health Sciences BJC. These students received 100% A to C passes under his tutelage. His professional experience also includes serving as an advisor in the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management, and Reconstruction. He has also worked with organizations such as the Inter-American Development Bank, the Caribbean Development Bank, and the Pacific Disaster Center. He has done work in countries like Ghana, Madagascar, and Colombia, and his love for country and national development resulted in his transition to the University of the Bahamas and as an assistant professor in disaster management and sustainability. In addition to this role, he works closely with the Vice President of Academic Affairs as the university's coordinator for program advisory committees, dual enrollment, and Jump Start. Beyond academia, Dr. Johnson is deeply committed to his community. He is a member of the Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated and serves as an advisor for the undergraduate chapter. Further to this, he is the director of environment for the Rotary Club of Old Fort Bay, and also the chairman of the Disaster Risk Management Committee for the Bahamas Red Cross Society. But most importantly, he is an active member of the Holy Cross Anglican Church, serving as the secretary of the church's vestry and vice president of the Anglican Church Men. Dr. Trevor O'Neill Johnson, Jr.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
It is indeed a pleasure to be with you today at St. Matthew's. I hope I don't get in trouble at Holy Cross because this has been something I've been asked to do before and have not responded positively. But nevertheless, I'm happy to be with you here at St. Matthew's. My presentation today is going to be relatively short, and probably one question or two afterwards. And the purpose of this conversation is to really set up our discourse tonight, because I'm going to be talking about climate change. My good colleague and friend Caitlin is going to then continue the conversation by discussing disaster risk management. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, you should be able to answer this fundamental question: what is climate change? One of the first things that I want us to talk about is that carbon dioxide, just like most elements in our atmosphere, as we speak now, it's being recycled. The main driver of climate change, meaning what is causing climate change, is the increase in emission of greenhouse gases, meaning when we pollute our atmosphere through factories, burning fossil fuels like oil and coal. Climate change is indeed an important Bahamian conversation, and it's very good to see that we're having this conversation here tonight. Very briefly, I won't go too deeply into this, but I think it's very important that we understand that we naturally find carbon dioxide in our environment. You know, there's a lot of talk about climate change and pollution, but I think one of the most important things that I want you to remember is naturally we need climate change in our atmosphere. Plants need it to make food. We release carbon dioxide when plants and animals break down. At the same token, our oceans are also absorbing carbon dioxide. So it's natural. But just like anything, when you put too much of something into the atmosphere, it creates a negative impact on that natural system or process. So humans, just like any other living organism, we are part of this thing we call the carbon cycle. However, across time, we have dramatically changed the amount of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. And you can take a wild guess based on the image on your right, that it's because we would have polluted our atmosphere, especially since the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution is the period between 1930 to 1950 when we started to use technology more to make things more efficient. So when we saw the development of automobiles, when we started to have mass factories across many countries around the world, we started to release more pollution into our atmosphere. But just so that you have a foundational understanding of, carbon dioxide is natural, but we put too much of it into the atmosphere, I want us to understand this, this fundamental premise. If you look at the image on your right, what is that image? That's a what? A greenhouse. It's a greenhouse. And what's the purpose of a greenhouse? Yeah, plants. What do they do well with heat? They tend to do what with heat? Yeah, they tend to trap a lot of heat. So one of the things that I want us to know is that our atmosphere, which is a layer of gas that surrounds the Earth, is a natural greenhouse. And we need that layer of atmosphere to trap heat. Because if we don't trap some of the sun's heat, the planet Earth will freeze. So we need that greenhouse, the atmosphere to act as a greenhouse. But the problem is, because we've been releasing so much carbon dioxide into our atmosphere, the heat is unable to escape. So we produce a lot of carbon dioxide, and they trap heat into our atmosphere. And that is why we call it the enhanced greenhouse effect. So when you hear about the greenhouse effect, it's natural. We want our atmosphere to act as a greenhouse. We want it to trap heat. But the issue is, what we're observing is this enhanced greenhouse effect. So this is a very short video. I like to show people about climate change. It's by Bill Nye. He's a famous scientist in the United States. He talks about climate change and the impacts of it.
Despite the noise about uncertainty in the political arena,
warming will actually save lives, not endanger them.
do I believe scientists? No! The fundamentals of climate change have been understood by scientists for decades. To start with, there are naturally occurring gases, such as carbon dioxide and methane in the Earth's atmosphere. In themselves, they aren't bad. In fact, we need them in limited quantities to keep our atmosphere at just the right temperature for life as we know it to exist on Earth. But if we produce an excess of these gases, as we have, the temperature rises, as it has. If you want, you could replicate this effect yourself in a simple lab experiment. Here's how. Take two identical bottles and set them side by side. Put a thermometer in each bottle and seal them. Then run a hose from a source of CO2 into one of the bottles. Shine two heat lamps of equal intensity at equal distance onto each one. Within minutes, you will see the temperature of the bottle with the carbon dioxide in it rising faster and higher. The bottles are like our atmosphere. The lamps are like our sun. Most of the solar radiation reaching the Earth is absorbed by the surface and atmosphere, which in turn radiates energy out towards space as infrared energy. Heat. Most of the heat energy from the surface is then absorbed by the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and radiated back down toward the surface. The more greenhouse gases we create, the more heat is absorbed and sent back toward the surface to cause further warming. This recycled heat does more than bump up the thermometer. Warm air has the capacity to hold more moisture, and water vapor is itself a greenhouse gas. So there's even more warming, which means the planet's entire hydrological cycle, the water cycle, is affected. More evaporation, more precipitation, more extremes in general. For nearly 1 million years, the CO2 content of the atmosphere moved within a natural bandwidth. But during the Industrial Revolution, humans started burning fossil fuels in increasingly large amounts. In fact, now, that's around 7 billion of us, rely on carbon-based fuels for 85% of our energy. Humans currently produce around 35 billion tons of carbon dioxide every year. About 55% of that is absorbed by the ocean, land, and vegetation, while the rest remains in the atmosphere. Most of that excess comes from burning fossil fuels, and more than half of the emissions come from power plants and factories, while about a third comes from our various forms of transportation. If we continue the current trajectory, by the time our children reach middle age, the levels of atmospheric CO2 will reach twice that of our planet's long-time natural levels. That is why we're already seeing the temperature increase, and we're already seeing the consequences. 4% more moisture in the atmosphere above the ocean is enough to transition to a new normal. Dramatic weather events, floods, storms, droughts, fires, they're all happening at a frequency and intensity we've never experienced throughout human history. In other words, climate change.
So good. That is just a basic overview of what climate change is, and setting the conversation. One of the things I like to do whenever I have a conversation about climate change is I like to explain the science of it very simply to people, because I know that this is a topic that we hear about in the news and media. Quite often, some of us, we don't necessarily understand or know what it means or can explain it. And that's why when you have some world leaders talk about climate change being a hoax, some of us may fall trapped in believing because we simply don't understand. But once again, this is the basics of climate change. Remember, we said that our Earth, look at the image on the left, that's showing you the greenhouse effect. Naturally, our Earth is a greenhouse. But the issue is if you look at the image on the right, when we put more greenhouse gases, like carbon dioxide or methane, into our atmosphere, it traps the heat. The heat is unable to escape or leave our atmosphere. So this global warming leads to climate change. And climate change is the long-term change or variation in climate, weather patterns, and temperature. So this is what we observe over a very long period of time. So climate change isn't short-term. So for example, rain hard today and then rain hard tomorrow, you say it's climate change. No. We observe climate change by looking at data across time. Seeing if we're seeing changes in temperature across years and sometimes even decades. Before we go into the consequences, one of the things I want us to recognize is who's at fault. Why are we talking about climate change? Who are the main polluters? If we look at this image, the main polluters, which country? China. You may not be able to see it, but that pink image on your right, that is the pink sector of the pie is China, which releases about 28% of carbon green emissions into our atmosphere. And the United States follows, and we have other countries like India and Japan who also release a lot of pollution into our atmosphere. Let's briefly look at the consequences of climate change, meaning we know what climate change is, we know what's causing climate change, how are we experiencing it? One of the first things in terms of climate change is we're noticing a rise in sea surface and atmospheric temperatures, meaning the oceans are getting warmer and also the air around us is becoming warmer. From 1901 to 2023, the temperatures have rose on average of 0.14 degrees Fahrenheit every decade. So we've seen an increase in temperature every decade from 1901. And sea surface temperatures has been consistently higher during the last 3 decades. Even if you look at this graph, it shows us how temperatures are constantly increasing, especially post 1950. Notice the bar graphs on the right, it's going up, showing us increase in temperature. Even if you look at sea surface temperature, meaning the temperature of the water, the image on your left shows us the temperature of the main development region in the Atlantic Ocean. This is where we see our hurricanes forming, the main area for development. And if you look at it, it was a bit warm. But when we look at it last year, in 2024, we see it's much warmer. It's much redder. And that's why the last hurricane season was predicted to be extremely active, because the sea surface temperatures were very, very high. Luckily, what saved us was this phenomenon called El Nino Southern Oscillation, and it was in our favor. We're not certain if that is going to be the case again for this hurricane season. So we can see that with those warmer, the temperatures are becoming warmer. And of course, as the temperature increases, we know that the north and south poles of our Earth, we have a lot of glaciers, a lot of ice. We're seeing a lot of ice loss across the world. The Alps has lost nearly 40% of its surface area. And Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa has melted by more than 80%. This is the image of Mount Kilimanjaro. The first image at the top shows you in the early 1950s. And in 1999, this is the cover of Mount Kilimanjaro because of the increase in temperature on Earth's surface. Another big thing that we talk about is sea level rise. Sea levels are rising. Now, the Florida Climate Center published an article just last year that's noted that sea levels across Florida, right next to the Bahamas, have risen by as much as 8 inches since 1950. This is not Trevor Johnson, this is from the Florida Climate Center. The Bahamas is perhaps one of the most vulnerable countries with respect to sea level rise, as 80% of its land mass is less than 1 meter above sea level. And one particular geographer suggests that sea levels could rise by as much as 3 feet by the year 2100. And sea level rise is caused because of course, the melting ice, and also because as water heats, it expands. We call that the thermal expansion of water. Another big impact of climate change that we noticed was in the Bahamas in 2023, there was a massive coral bleaching episode where the coral was losing its color. Because our coral reef ecosystems depend on the water temperature to be at a very light temperature. And if it goes too high, what happens is the coral expels certain materials and it loses its color and essentially it dies. Because that's a living part of the coral. And we saw massive coral bleaching across the Bahamas in 2023 because of the extremely high temperatures around the Bahamas. So this is actually an image of a coral off the coast of Exuma in 2023. And of course, why we're here, and what most Bahamians care about when we talk about climate change is more intense hurricanes. One of the most concerning impacts to the Bahamas that's becoming prominent is indeed the possibility for more intense hurricanes. Now, I'll be very honest with you, the research is not sure if we're going to see more frequent hurricanes, but one thing that is very clear is that we're going to see more intense hurricanes. So, I'd be lying if I tell you every year we're going to get hit with a hurricane because we're not observing it. But what we are observing is the hurricanes across time are becoming more and more stronger. It's what we call rapid intensification. Because the sea surface temperatures are so warm, the hurricanes are becoming more stronger, much quicker. We've noticed it with Dorian. We also noticed it, I can't remember the storm that impacted Dominica just last year. I think it was Maria. Beryl, yes. Beryl was also a product of rapid intensification. They're seeing storms go from a Category 1, Category 2 storm to Category 5 storm overnight. This is concerning. This is when we talk about climate change and how it's related. Even when we look at the major impacts of hurricanes across the Bahamas since Hurricane Francis and Jane, most of the hurricanes that pass through the Bahamas now are major hurricanes. Hurricanes Joaquin and Matthew were Category 4, and Irma and Dorian were Category 5 storms. So they're becoming stronger. And of course, we know that climate change is very real, based on our Bahamian experience with Hurricane Dorian. But sometimes I like to let people know about our brothers and sisters around the world, because we can't just focus on the Bahamas. There are countries in the Pacific Ocean that's just like the Bahamas, they're small. They're called Tuvalu, Kiribati, and Vanuatu. In particular, in Kiribati, the image at the very top where you see where it looks like puddles of water, that was once land. And sea levels have risen so much that the government is now trying to reclaim that land. If you look, you begin to see houses actually, but I don't think you're able to see it, but there's actually houses in between that. That was once land. That's because of sea level rise. Because we like to think, because it's not happening in the Bahamas now, it isn't real, it's a myth. But countries are experiencing it now. As a matter of fact, Kiribati has actually purchased land in another country in the event that they have to migrate. This country is expected to be the first batch of climate refugees because of sea level rise. If you look at the image of the seawall right in Guyana, Georgetown, the capital, is very low lying, and they're beginning to experience the impacts of sea level rise as we speak today. And not only the Bahamas experience very strong hurricanes, but Typhoon Pam, I believe it was Vanuatu, significantly destroyed Vanuatu in 2020 as a massive major cyclone. And see, this is actually an article that spoke about how Vanuatu can take years to recover from hurricanes, so it's not only the Bahamas. This is an image from Bangladesh. This is an almost, I want to say, quarterly occurrence in Bangladesh because of climate change. The floods that we're seeing, it's repeating, it's always happening because of the changes that we see in our climate. And even when we look at the trends in the number of disasters across time, we're seeing that the number of disasters caused by natural hazards has increased significantly since the 1970s. So it's not only the Bahamas, but it's other countries around the world. Now, I know a lot of this information sometimes gets us, feeling some type of way. But are we hopeless and helpless? Are we hopeless and helpless? No, we're not. Even though climate is changing, even though we're experiencing these impacts, there are things that we can do to adapt to these impacts or reduce the impacts that we see. So there are things that we can most definitely do, and that some countries have already done to ensure that we can deal with the impacts of climate change. Before I go, I just want to have one wrap-up question to see what you have taken away from this conversation. So imagine someone who did not sit here with you today. During the greeting of peace, the lady at church asked you about climate change. From this presentation, give us 3 basic points that you would have learned. What are 3 basic points that you would share with them? It's why everyone is real. See a hand at the back.
What's happening is an advanced version of a greenhouse effect.
Yes, great. Any other one? See anything I see a hand? Yes, carbon dioxide levels are rising. And we're doing that, by the way. Anything else? Anyone else?
All is not lost.
Yes, 110. Hurricanes are getting stronger. But there is hope, yes. There is hope. Anything else? How can we stop it? So, in terms of how can we, I'll talk about in terms of how climate change, unfortunately, remember the image that I showed you this year? These are the people who can stop, who can reduce what we're saying. The countries that are releasing a lot of pollution, countries like China, United States, and India, they are the ones who can determine, because we're already experiencing the impact, so we can't, even if we reduce all pollution today, which is not possible, we would still continue to experience climate change because our atmosphere has already been significantly damaged. So it's just like us. If the doctor tells us we have diabetes today, we stop eating sugar, that don't mean tomorrow we won't have diabetes anymore. It's going to take a while before we can get, to some point of normalcy. Any other questions?
Does the methane gas in the house make it happen?
Yes. Methane is actually a more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So that's why you see some people who are very, very serious about environmentalism and climate change, they're vegetarians, because they recognize that cattle farming also is responsible, agriculture, especially cattle farming, is responsible for a lot of methane, and methane is a very powerful greenhouse gas. So actually 4 times more stronger than carbon dioxide.
And do you have any islands that are currently experiencing
In Bahamas? I think that's a very good question, but that's also a very difficult question to answer. Because one of the things that we struggle with in the Bahamas is that with data, especially along the coastline, collecting information on like how much really, but I would say that yes, you know, based on stories and what we know to be, and how wide some beaches were, we're seeing the sea levels rising. That's just based on analytical information, but to say definitively, like how in Florida measuring, you know, sea levels, that, but we can say yes, of course. But if you're looking for hard proof evidence, like how much, and we can't do that in the Bahamas right now.
Are we moving towards getting that type of data?
I think we should. And I do, in countries like Barbados, they have what we call the coastal zone management unit, that they do stuff like this, exactly, in changes in the coastline across time.
And then the Ministry of Works, they have a grant, I believe, that actually that deals with integrated coastal zone management. So they've been having, they have 3 islands they've been doing studies on, the Providence, Long Island, and Anguilla. So they pick 20 locations, like, so for Long Island, it's the Dennis area. The Providence is completely dry out, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but Anguilla.
I think it's those sound.
Yeah, and I go ski area. So they have some studies that were conducted, so now they're trying to find mitigation methods to help with the coastal erosion.
Thank you, Kate. Any other questions?
Carbon credit. What is carbon credit?
So, carbon credit is, I have very interesting views on the carbon market, carbon credit. I don't believe that we should be participating in the carbon market. I believe that the carbon market, even before the Bahamas, that is the reason why we're not seeing any advances in climate change, because of the carbon market. So how the carbon market works in very simple terms is, let's say a factory out west, BPL, releases 2 tons of carbon dioxide. Another island, let's say Exoma, has about 2 acres of seagrass, and we say that that seagrass can absorb that 2 tons of carbon dioxide. So what would happen is that factory would pay whoever owns that seagrass, maybe the government, money for that, because that seagrass can absorb that carbon dioxide. But what's the problem with that? I mean, we're still polluting. We're not stopping the pollution. So all we're doing, all the carbon market does is essentially pay people to pollute. Exactly, as opposed to reducing pollution. That is my view, by the way. And in 2001 was when we saw the carbon market become developed through the Marrakesh Accords. And if you talk to most people who do a lot of policy work in this space, they tell you that the Marrakesh Accords, while it was supposed to encourage participation of countries like the United States, it eventually led to the weakening of international climate change agreements. Yes?
Comment. Trees are very important to controlling the greenhouse gases as well, right?
Yes.
So why so far it seems like the government's cutting down a lot of trees in certain areas?
I mean, I think it just comes. I think it just comes down to what, you know, maybe they need to land or something else. But I think that's a good question. You know, we need trees to absorb carbon dioxide from our atmosphere. But I don't want us to think about the Bahamas in terms of our pollution, because what we contribute to climate change is very, 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 very little. Like nothing. But the bigger countries are the ones who are polluting more, and they're actually not reducing their pollution by the way they should, and largely because of this carbon market scheme. You know, they're finding a way in the name of, you know, giving money to this company to actually, instead of actually encouraging people to reduce their emissions. So for example, I think it was in 2022 or 23, a lot of countries, especially small island developing states, were trying to get India to phase out coal, because India uses a lot of coal. And India refused to agree to that. Instead, they said they'd phase down coal. So that's, you know, they said they ain't phasing up, they'd phase down. What does that mean? Exactly. So that's why I am personally against the carbon market. I actually think it's very contradictory for any small island developing state to become engaged in the carbon market. And this is the view of Dr. Trevor Johnson, by the way. Let me just make that abundantly clear. You will find someone who agrees. I'm just letting you know my opinion on this concept. Any other questions?
Well,
Yes, sir.
Dr. Trevor, if in your view, we contribute a minuscule amount of carbon dioxide emissions compared to the goal, then I guess some persons who have the view that to our benefit to participate to carbon trade, to get some money.
To get money from it?
Yeah, if your view is that our contribution is minuscule.
So here's the thing. So in terms of getting money from the carbon market, that is very difficult to get, and that was one of the reasons why in 2001, when this was first developed, it wasn't actually developed for developing countries or small island developing states, largely because of the burden it would place on small island developing states. So, for example, we don't trust BPL to give us an accurate amount of our usage. So we really believe we're at the point where we can determine how much acres of carbon dioxide is absorbed from a forest or mangroves. This is just being realistic because we don't have the technologies. That has not been our focus as a country trying to develop. We've been trying to ensure education, social services, healthcare. Those are the issues that small and developing states have been struggling and dealing with. And these advances in environmentalism and technologies are simply not translated to most of our countries because that's not been our focus. The amount of technical capacity and the amount of resources that's going to require for us, one, to be able to determine the sequestration power of maybe a seagrass bed off Exuma is going to be very onerous. The process is going to be very difficult and it may cost us more money to participate than what we will actually get. It's the same reason why you won't find some development banks like the IDB in countries like St. Kitts or in St. Lucia because of the amount, the burden that it actually places on the government to actually get those things done. Things have to make sense. While it may be good, it may place more burden on the government. So that's one of the issues that a lot of people recognize the climate market that we simply don't have. We struggle with basic things. Determining the electricity bill. My electricity bill was $200 last month. I was in the country for almost a week. So we're struggling with this. So judge way more complex. I have colleagues at the University of Bahamas, they're doing this work. They're trying to determine how much carbon dioxide can be absorbed by a mangrove. They've been doing this project for 3 years, and they have covered maybe 0.001% of our mangrove, of our ability of our mangroves to absorb carbon dioxide. So it's just realistically. And even if you realize the government, I think just released an article that says that we could possibly see the benefits of the carbon market in the next 5 years. I don't expect us to ever see any benefits of the carbon market. And that is my view, by the way.
No, what they're doing, they're allowing the people who are using the marshland, the swampland, mangrove, ride around and see them filling it and so it's reducing marshland or mangrove.
Yes.
They cover all the southern part from Ivy Road we pass the main Anglican house. On this side, the south side, all that marshland or mangrove into the sea as you drive. They have that now, half of it covered now, and they walk in your view with these wood piles like how people do it down. So it's almost until reach the Ivy side. So they are covering all the mangroves.
Yeah, so, and see, this is why we need, and most times, and this is an issue that we have had bombs across that. This isn't just a yesterday thing, this has been a long issue. But for some reason, these are the things that the payments are not necessarily interested in on a day-to-day basis. You know, so this is why forums like this is very good. Because once you get the knowledge, then you could possibly, you know, have a shift in what you expect from them.
But our Prime Minister, I heard about, the environment, but he is not looking down on it. Because who they are, them people, it's very good. You understand, who are, covering your mind. And he was talking about climate change, the environment.
I understand. I think we have a lot of work to do generally in this country about ensuring that we do what we can do internally, especially in environmental space. I think we have a lot of work to do internally as a country. I think that's it for questions. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to the next person.
Taylor is a dedicated disaster risk management professional with over 4 years of experience in emergency preparedness, resilience planning, training, and community-based risk reduction. She has played a key role in both national and regional initiatives aimed at strengthening disaster management frameworks across the Bahamas and the wider Caribbean. Her professional journey began at the former National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, where she served as a technical associate and contributed to a range of environmental and disaster-related programs. She now continues this work at the Disaster Risk Management DRM Authority, where she holds the position of Senior Planning and Research Officer within the Planning, Mitigation, and Research Division. Caitlin is particularly passionate about climate resilience and sustainable development, consistently applying a proactive, people-centered approach to her work. Her commitment to protecting vulnerable communities remains central to her growing impact in the field. While at NEMA, Caitlin expanded her technical expertise by developing proficiency in Geographic Information Systems, GIS, a critical tool for disaster planning and mitigation efforts. Her academic background includes 2 undergraduate degrees, one in biology with a minor in chemistry from the College of the Bahamas, and another in environmental health from East Carolina University in Greenville, North Carolina. She also holds a master's degree in disaster risk management and climate governance from Isabel University in Spain. Outside of her professional pursuits, Caitlin enjoys traveling and baking in her free time. Let's welcome our very own Caitlin.
Represent. Yes. But that's actually a good segue. May is also recognized as Hurricane Preparedness Month. I just like to say the disclaimer, Carl Smith is not allowed to ask me any questions. So, our theme for this month is get ready, don't wait, get storm ready. So I just want to give a little background for where I work at the DRM Authority. So the government of today saw a need that after Hurricane Dorian, there was a devastating reminder that climate change is getting stronger and more frequent and intense storms. So they felt that it was a need for stronger disaster management for these type of instances. So the answer was to shift to a more comprehensive and proactive disaster management approach. Therefore, we had the passing of the Disaster Risk Management Act in December of 2022, and therefore led to the formation of the Disaster Risk Management Authority. So the Disaster Risk Management Authority is a quasi-government organization that was formed from the merger of the National Emergency Management Agency and the Disaster Reconstruction Authority. Like I said, the act was passed in 2022 and it was operationalized this year on July 1st. So it was a mandate by the government of the Bahamas to build on the work of our predecessors and execute the instruments of the DRM Act and to direct more comprehensive and proactive disaster management approach. So the roles and responsibilities of the DRM Authority, it protects, empowers, and prepares the Bahamas for natural hazards. Can anyone tell me any of the natural hazards that we commonly face other than hurricanes? Yes, wildfires, flooding, and then one more. Anyone can guess other than man-made reasons why we have these wildland fires? Right, drought. So we are the official disaster management agency of the Bahamas that's responsible for coordinating natural disaster planning and responses. So we cover all stages of the disaster cycle. We have mitigation, preparation, response, and recovery. So before I get into what these phases are, a lot of these phases overlap each other. So sometimes you have mitigation efforts also go along with our preparation efforts. So mitigation, because the question was asked earlier, how can we stop climate change? We can't stop it, but we can make mitigation efforts to help reduce the impacts of climate change. So mitigation is the lessening of the impact of storms through disaster risk management, planning, and providing long-term solutions backed by data and technology. Preparation, collaborate with government and private sector partners, NGOs, to ensure readiness of all responders, equipment, and supplies in the event of a disaster. Response, we have to coordinate with our stakeholders for any response, and recovery to oversee the delivery of humanitarian relief and recovery efforts. So some of our key instruments in our DRM Act is various plans. You have the National Disaster Risk Management Plan, the National Disaster Emergency Plan, Family Island and Public Body Plans, and Family Island Emergency Plan. So public body plans would be Ministry of Health has their plans for disasters, Department of Social Services have their plans, Ministry of Works have their plans, BPL, our favorite utility company, BTC, Alive, etc., and Water and Sewage. So we partner with all of these different agencies to help protect you. So we also, for the first of its kind, we have what was implemented a disaster prevention fund and a disaster emergency fund. We also have a national humanitarian assistance standards, and new of its kind also is the National Non-Governmental Council. So, hurricane season is here. Anyone can tell me when hurricane season starts? June 1st, we tell when. Okay. So let's talk about tropical cyclones. So tropical cyclones is the common name for both. It's a common name for tropical depressions, tropical storms, and hurricanes. So it's just not hurricanes, because we can always be impacted by any of these types of storms. Anyone remembers Tropical Storm Noel? And we remember that how much damage it caused, and that was just a tropical storm. Normally we get locks when we see a tropical depression or a tropical storm that approaches us, but we can't get locks no more. We always have to be, I would say, over-prepared. It's better to be over-prepared than under-prepared. Agreed? So a tropical cyclone is a warm, cold, low-pressure system that develops over the tropical or subtropical waters and a organized circulation. So some of the conditions that these tropical cyclones like to be in are open, warm water. What are we surrounded by? Hot water. I can't even say warm water no more. It's hot. And it open. All we got is water. We got more water than we have land. And for some reason, our storms like to stay and intensify in our waters. We saw with Dorian, it actually got to 0 miles per hour. Joaquin developed off the coast of Long Island literally within hours. It intensified. So all we have is warm water. So officially, the hurricane season is June 1st to November 30th. However, we've seen instances where storms have started to develop in May, December, and I think it was a year or two ago, there was a disturbance in January. Literally, when people just coming back to work from Christmas break, there's the storm merging. I think Mrs. Smith has something to do with that. So there are 5 categories of hurricanes. So we have category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I think now it's going to be 5 plus because Dorian was literally off the scale. So here are the different types of hazards that we have with these tropical cyclones. So we have surges, strong winds, extreme flooding, and tornadic activity. So, alerts. So these are the type of alerts that we should be looking for. You have the hurricane watch or tropical storm watch, where conditions are expected to make landfall within 48 hours. And you have hurricane or tropical storm warnings, where you have conditions that would make landfall in 72 hours. Sorry, that's wrong. So here are the names of the Atlantic hurricane season of 2025.
Andrew? Seriously? That could be a bottle. That could be mine. 3.
Yeah, let me call my names over there. I actually know a couple for the names last year. I won't call the names, but I know a couple, well, at least a wife. She got excited because her and her husband name was together. I ain't call no names. So these are the predictions of for the storms projected for this year. So Dr. Johnson had mentioned earlier that last year we had what we call an El Nino, which literally, quote unquote, saved us from any major impact. However, based on the MAC department's prediction, the Bahamas meteorology, we would have what we considered a neutral year. And in that neutral year, I don't want to say cause of concern, but when we had neutral year conditions, we had Irma, we had Joaquin, and we had Dorian. Not to get back, don't panic, just get ready. So, how do you get ready by preparing your home? Anyone have any?
Shirts.
Yeah.
Put your bets inside.
Right. Well, the past would be a last minute thing. But what could we do from now? Right. So let's prepare our home on the outside. Maintain and inspect your house. do routine inspections and try to make any maintenance updates, make any necessary repairs to help reduce in the event that there is an impact. So make sure you check for your roofs for any leaks, any shingles. Go by CVS. I'm not advertising for them. Or Kelly's. Fire tops. Make sure you have the proper shutters and not tape for your windows and doors. Trim any trees, especially if they are lying towards the power lines or the utility lines. If you have the necessary equipment to do so, safety comes first. And then know how to turn off your gas, electricity, and water in the event that you have to evacuate from your home. So that's how we can prepare our home. What can we do to prepare our church?
Great.
I would say you should always pray. However, work along with the maintenance committee. I would suggest, the organizations of the church work along with the maintenance committee. Because I think it was Hurricane Matthew when the stained glass window was broken into. And I remember getting a call in the States asking me if I had a picture of how it would look so you could replace the panel. So now's the time to take pictures, inspect the shutters on the outside of the church windows to see what upgrades need to be done. We have guests inside the graveyard. Let's make sure their things are disposed properly, etc. And even with the tree trimming and shrubs, Mr. Sherman. So, how to prepare your home on the inside? Secure all important documents somewhere that is waterproof, safe, and where possible, digitize them. Take a picture of your passport. You should always have a picture of your passport and any identification in your phone. Any event that you may actually need your passport for something, whether it be work-related or whatever. No, not when you go to the U.S. You need your passport in your hand. I know when NEMA visited the Pacific Disaster Center, we visited the Maui Emergency Management Agency, and as a parting gift to us, they gave us 2 heavy-duty Ziploc bags. So ever since that date, that's where my passport, voters card, my COVID identification, and something else in there. 1, that way I can find it, and then 2, it in a safe place so in the event that when I have to go to work, if we have to activate, I can grab that Ziploc bag and I can go to work. So, put your stuff in a waterproof container. This isn't new to us. Fill containers with clean water in the event that water supply is disrupted or contaminated. Many of us in New Providence have our own private wells. We don't have water and sewages supply. However, they have the necessary chemicals to ensure that the water is safe. Set your refrigerator to the coldest temperature, especially if you don't have a generator, because our favorite utility company, out of the abundance of safety and caution, will disconnect. Notice what I said, out of the abundance of safety. Let me stop before they turn the light off. So, stock up on at least 7 days worth of non-perishable food and water. You need a gallon of water per person in your household per day. So if one of you in your household, have enough water. If 10 of y'all in your household, have enough water for 7 days. And to prepare a hurricane supply kit. Now, I'll make suggestions, but you have to modify it to where it's feasible to you. These are the ideal suggestions. However, life is be lifing. So you need water, canned goods, a manual can opener or knife, a flashlight, Notice we got away from,
Candles.
exactly, because that could cause your fires. You need a battery-powered radio, or you could use a cell phone. You need a first aid kit. And sure you have, it says 7 days here for medications. But I would advise at least 2 weeks. I say 2 weeks, because not everybody could afford to buy 2 months of supply of medication. So have at least 2 weeks in the event that, one, the hospital is compromised, you can't get anything from the pharmacy, or the local pharmacies are compromised. What you can do, you need your medication. Have a multi-purpose tool, like a Swiss Army knife, a small hatchet in the event that you have to go into your roof. I would also add, if you have ladders in your homes, have it near the manhole in the event that you have to get up into your roofs, especially if you only live in a one-story. Personal hygiene kits and sanitation items. Again, your personal documents, all your medical information, passport, driver's license, NIV, well, your NIV and your driver's license, your voter's card, the proof this is where you live, your cell phone along with a backup power bank, a contact list for family and emergencies contact information. So if you have family on the family islands, you could be their emergency contact, or they could be your emergency contact. Extra cash, because ATM's going down, because why? We don't have no,
PPA.
right. So what to do after a hurricane? To prevent mold growth, air out your house, and disinfect. Throw away any food that may be unsafe. When in doubt, throw it out. It's pretty advisable in the environmental health world for food safety. You shouldn't have food in your house without electricity for maybe 2 days, so I wouldn't advise you to eat it. Stay in tune to the local authorities. Notice I said the local authorities, so that would be us, the DRM authority, and the Bahamas Met Department. Not the Met Department in Florida, because Florida doesn't care about us. The Bahamas Met Department, because those meteorologists work 24/7, especially during a storm. They are in our emergency operations center with us round the clock. Those are the ones that you should trust. This one in particular is for our men. Wear protective equipment, like goggles and gloves when clearing debris. Because once you, this is pre and post event. Because if you start to trim a tree and a piece of the branch go in your eye and the doctor office closed and the hospital only is open for women who may be in labor, what you could do? Always wear personal protective equipment. Don't walk in flooded waters because they could contain dangerous debris. I would also advise you, in your preparation, make sure you don't have anything in your yard that can contain water. Because once water is contained over a period of time, that's when our favorite friends, the mosquitoes, start to grow. And we don't know what these mosquitoes have until it's too late. Mosquitoes carry Zika, dengue. Anybody remember dengue fever? I remember. So, back to, don't use electrical equipment if it's wet. Don't enter a building until it's been inspected for damage. That's not an excuse not to go to work. But make sure the building is clear for you to go to work. Now, if the building is clear, you go to work. Avoid drinking and cooking water with tap water until you know it's safe. So, for those of us who have our own private wells, ensure that you have the necessary chlorine tablets to treat your water, because the water supply could become contaminated. I know during Dorian, that's when we had the oil spill. And that could have seeped into our that could cause soil contamination and water contamination. And salt water. Okay. So, insure your home. Your home is your biggest asset. Don't make the mistake of thinking it won't happen to you. So if you are fortunate enough to have a home insurance policy, ensure that your house is adequately covered or speak to your insurance agent about options. Confirm that you are insured for full replacement value of your home. Get it appraised every 3 years to know how much you need to cover your house for. In the Bahamas, many providers provide catastrophic home insurance, which covers hurricanes, floods, fires, etc. And that would be an average cost of how much it would be to insure a home worth $300,000.
That's not
No
contents.
flood and hurricane is separate, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And contents.
I like to make a disclaimer, I do not work for an insurance company.
Water, your house.
So, hi.
If you have the full catastrophic hurricane policy, it covers the hurricane, covers everything.
There you
That's
go.
insurance. If you,
Thank you.
What company that is?
sorry,
What company is that?
that is a standard policy.
No, ma'am.
Catastrophic,
Not with my insurance company. What company is that?
So, confirm, for those of you who have home insurance, confirm with your agent what your insurance policy covers. Maybe it's just not for hurricanes, confirm what your insurance policy covers. Because it don't make no sense you paying this insurance payment and you don't know what it covers.
You have to ask for hurricane and flood. You have to
Right.
ask for it.
they are included in the catastrophe coverage.
The woman just retired from insurance.
So, anybody has a family plan? Yes? No? Maybe so? Maybe so? So let's make a household emergency plan. Compile a list of emergency contacts, including police, then your nearest shelter. The shelter listing will be out in time for hurricane season. They're wrapping up shelter inspections. And also note that there are no purpose-built shelters in the Bahamas at the moment. Make sure you have your family doctor, or in our case, our church doctor, Dr. Davis, hospitals, next of kin, and our hotlines, which are listed here. Designate a shelter room in your house, so that would be like a room away from windows. So that could also be like your hallway in the event, or the bathroom, because that's normally the smallest window in the house. Question?
You said earlier that there are no hurricane.
I said there are no purpose-built shelters at the moment.
What about the building that was just opened a few weeks ago in Nassau Village?
In Nassau, that's a different type of shelter.
Oh.
That's a different type
No,
of
but it
shelter.
was also, according to them, it was dubbed as a hurricane shelter as well.
Hopefully. That's what the news said.
It have to meet the standards.
If it's on the approved shelter listing for the Atlantic hurricane season of 2025, if that's your nearest shelter, make sure that's on your emergency plan list. So, create an evacuation plan. Know your nearest shelter and evacuation routes. So, know your area. Is your area normally flooded? Do you have a low-lying vehicle? Do you have access to a vehicle that can pass through water safely and semi-safely? Note these things. Make sure that you have a full tank of gas, because again, our gas stations could be compromised and our fuel supply could also be compromised. Set aside appropriate attire such as a long shirt, long pants, durable shoes, and rain gear in the event that you have to pick up and leave your home. So I know one of my mentors said when she had younger children, she used to tell her husband, make sure the children don't sleep in their pajamas. Let them sleep in like in a warm-up suit in the event that y'all have to run. Take note of that. If you don't want to sleep in them, have them there by an event, you gotta grab them and run. Close all your doors, lock all your windows, but your windows should be already quote-unquote locked because they will be protected by your shutters. Unplug any electrical devices or turn off your circuit breaker. And then have a go bag to go. And then practice your plan. Does your children, do your grandchildren know what to do in the event of an emergency? Do you know what to do in the event of an emergency? Don't stay. If we tell you to leave, leave. I remember during Matthew and Dorian, I watched those news broadcasts in the US. There was no reason why we had to stay in our homes because the governments of those days pleaded with everyone to leave.
I'm going where?
So you have to go to your shelter.
Cave.
No, you laughing, and that's actually what persons used to do in the familiares and back in the day.
Go to cave.
In Cat Island, and in Luther in particular, I've heard stories, those are safe.
Yeah, water.
Of course, you know. I little biased towards them, man.
Albert Gracie, go to cave.
So, if we tell you to go, please go.
Amen.
I'll make my comment after we stop live streaming. Know where your nearest shelter is. So, what to bring to the shelter? Make sure you have your water, your food, your medicine, flashlight for batteries, your radio, clothing, something to sleep with, first aid supplies, your hygiene items, your personal information. So remember when I said take pictures of all your documents? So in the event you can't run and grab your passport, you still have your identification on you at all times. Have your cash, and then something for entertainment. You have games, books, iPads, etc. So, persons with disabilities and medical conditions. Make sure your emergency kit has those modifications in it. Build a support network. We are a church family. Let's look out for our brothers and sisters who may need assistance with their roofs. I don't put the ECM on glass, but you know, let's help out our church family if they need help. But you have to also say that you need the help. Emergency training, evacuation planning, and communicate your needs. Where if you have special medical alert tags, make sure you have them on at all times. And most importantly, stay informed on the official sources, such as the DRM Authority, on any of our digital platforms. We have Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. And that's my presentation.
Are there any questions?
Any questions? No? Okay. Can I have some prizes and some material to pass out? Yeah. So, these pamphlets are courtesy of the DRM Authority to help you with planning your emergency kit and your family plans. I have some goodies. Anybody can show me that you follow us on any of our platforms?
Oh, we have a question also.
Okay, I did.
I have more comments. I think in our experience dealing with hurricanes, injuries and deaths tend to happen post-event. For example, electrocution and the poor use of portable generators.
Yes, don't have your generator in your house because you can produce carbon monoxide, which is a silent killer.
Those signs cause problems. So I just want to mention.
So any questions? So anybody, yeah.
I have a comment. Every time, I don't know how much we realize, but every time we have an outage, that's an opportunity for us to make sure that our preparedness advisory is updated. You know, I attended presentation medical school, and it was a question that was asked, or comment made, that, you know, one thing in the Bahamas, what is it that we are always prepared for? Everybody is giving all sorts of answers. But the presenter said, you have to realize that as much as we complain about that time with BBC makes sure that we are always ready for when a disaster occurs. So while we might laugh and snicker, that's an opportunity. And for those persons who have generators and solar, use that still as an opportunity to make sure that we are prepared.
So nobody want my prize? Come, let me see. Come, let me see. It can't be the same one. It's the one. Okay.
And I have Facebook.
Okay, then everybody get a prize. I need one. So thank you for having me.
Trevor, you can stand up, please.
Good evening. Let's give a round of applause for two dynamic, young, experienced, and boy with a vast of knowledge, Caitlin and Trevor. I am so pleased to be able to give and say thanks to both of them. I've known Trevor for a while. I won't say how long. long. Of course, he went to UB and he has really excelled and done very well, and I'm so proud of him. And I tell him that every day when I see him at UB. And of course, Caitlin, our very own, who, of course, I must say the presentations that you gave were concise. They had a lot of content and made it very simple for us to understand what it is that you're saying. We probably need to do more of it in our community. So I hope that you're invited to more places to do that. But on behalf of the Usher Board, our president, our executive team, and all of our members and our visitors who are here with us, we wish to say thank you so much for being here with us tonight. And don't make this your last time. You're welcome at any time. So Caitlin, on behalf of our president, our executive team, and our members, just want to say thank you. With this token of appreciation for being here with us. And of course, Dr. Trevor Johnson.
Thank you, thank you. I hope that you all enjoyed yourselves tonight. And it was great to see so many of you. We would like for you to remain behind for light refreshments. And